What is digestion? Let's begin. Why do we need to know these things? I think this is important in everybody's life. This provides you the knowledge of your own qualities and the qualities of the foods that might be beneficial to you, that can balance your digestion and provide the best possible results. So this knowledge is important also in order not to get in the state where you are out of balance and start accruing some diseases. In order to understand natural health, we need to know some things, and they are easy because nature speaks easy language, but we'd like to learn that language to get best possible results for ourselves. Today we'll speak language of nature, and it's not just about remedies, because most of the time people go for natural remedies, but based on allopathic Western medicine diagnosis. But natural medicine is not only that provides the remedies, it also provides the theoretical understanding of the conditions and the processes too. So in order to properly use the natural remedies, it is essential to know the fundamental principles of natural physiology in order to then use them for the best results. And Ayurveda is the mother of natural medicine. Without Ayurveda, no natural medicine can really be as strong as the scientific concept. So Ayurveda provides it all. And we begin with digestion. Why again? Because digestion is the basic principle for metabolism, for assimilation, for energy conversion, and for elimination. Assimilation of the nutrients, of course, and nutrients conversion into energy. And past that phase, it is the waste products that need to be eliminated properly so that cellular intelligence is restored and the process is well ratioed. So let's go with understanding what digestion is. And we all know that digestion is the process by which the food is broken down into smaller absorbable nutrients from the more complex food groups. And the body uses that for energy, for growth, and for repair. And digestive system, as we know, is a long tube of organs that include the mouth cavity, the esophagus, stomach, small intestine. The first part of the small intestine is called duodenum. This is where the ducts of liver and pancreas open to, and large intestine, which is called colon, and the lower parts of colon are sigmoid and rectum. Starting the slideshow, but here it is. So GI tract in Sanskrit is called Maha Vaha Shrota. It's the main channel that lies at the base of gross physical body and tissue formation. Our existence is based on the energy matrix for each tissue, for each organ, and then that matrix is filled with the physical matter, which is modified and optimized accordingly by the vibrations in order to fit into this energy matrix to manifest the physical body. And let's talk about the two phases of digestion. The first phase of digestion is the enzymatic phase, and the second one is the biotic phase. So the enzymatic phase is when we initially break the food with our own enzymes that our body produces and assimilate a lot of nutrients just by the enzymatic phase without having to pass it on to the biotic phase. But then some of the nutrients that cannot be easily extracted by our enzymatic phase processed by our microbiome, and that completes the digestion. The organs of the upper digestive tract secrete enzymes. It is the task of our body to do this process, like I said. Enzymes that are secreted in the oral cavity are salivary amylase and lingual lipase, but for the most part it is the saccharides that are processed within the mouth cavity and absorbed from out mouth cavity too. Some more complex polysaccharides, for example, are still initially processed but may not be quickly absorbed and will have to proceed on to the next departments of digestive tract. And some medicinal compounds of foods and herbs are also, and medications of course, can also be absorbed through the sublingual vascular network. They get absorbed under the tongue, and this is why sometimes nitroglycerin, for example, is given under the tongue sublingually in order to directly get into the bloodstream And very important, it is prana that is also absorbed within the mouth cavity. The longer we chew, the more we release flavors, and flavors what carry prana, but prana conversion is another important topic. So the initial moistening of the food happens here too. And overall, it's very important to extensively chew our food down to liquid consistency and not to introduce the new solid bite until you swallow the well-masticated piece of food of the previous bite. Very important when we extensively chewing. We want to finish liquefy the food in our mouth and then swallow it before we take next bite. As it is said, chew your water, drink your food. Understand and practice this principle. The food is processed in the oral cavity. It proceeds through the esophagus and gets down into the stomach, where it is subjected to a processing with hydrochloric acid and enzyme pepsin. However, there's some more other enzymes like stomach lipase too, which processes some of the fats, but it's not very much considerable in the stomach. The stomach works on proteins. It breaks down the proteins to the basic nutrients that are called amino acids. This is the nutrient building blocks that we require as far as the protein group of nutrients. We do not require any complex high molecular complete protein. It would still have to be disassembled down to amino acids to present the nutrient. If it does not get disassembled to amino acid, it does not pose nutritional value to our body. It is actually foreign body. Even the fragmental piece of protein, the DNA chain, which is not fully broken into amino acids, would still pose the threat of an antigen to our body. It can be absorbed in the bloodstream, and then from there, it will begin triggering allergic reaction. It may not happen in people whose digestive tract is intact and would not allow any larger fragments into the system, especially children. Once they grow into adults, they would start manifesting some inflammation and some autoimmune conditions and allergies. With years, a long-standing introduction of such fragments sooner or later result in leaky gut and the high permeability of the intestinal wall that will allow some undigested matter into the bloodstream, and from there it will start causing some problem. Gastric lipase in the stomach works on fats, but not very significantly. Environment in the stomach is highly acidic. The acids are working on proteins, and this is the type of environment that is required for proteins to get disassembled completely. Hydrochloric acid activates the enzyme pepsin. Sometimes too intense of the acidity or frequently introduced acidity in the stomach can shift the pH balance within our body and may conflict with the pH balance in the intestinal tract. If proteins are mixed with carbohydrates within the food, for example, like meats and potatoes, I would not say much about beans and grains. They're more centered and balanced. Saccharides are not digested in the stomach. They require alkaline environment. They would be digested in the small intestine. This is why they are kind of rushing to get into the small intestine. The body is pushing them into the small intestine. And in the case they're mixed with proteins, then the proteins would be very poorly processed in the stomach and would proceed along with the carbohydrates into the small intestine, where the digestion of the proteins significantly decreased. There's still some enzymes that can work on proteins, but within the alkaline environment with the enzyme trypsin and samoprotease enzyme, the complex proteins do not have a great chance to be disassembled to the basic nutrients, unfortunately, and they retain their fragmental structure of proteins, which has the consequences that we've spoken about. At this point, after the stomach digestion, the food proceeds to the small intestine. The first part of which is called duodenum, where the pancreatic enzymes and bile are secreted to work on carbohydrates and fats primarily, and finishing the digestion of proteins. Between the small intestine and stomach, there is the sphincter. It may get regurgitated. It's called pyloric sphincter. In case the pyloric sphincter regurgitates, Right here, we may experience some backflow of the alkaline environmental fluids inside the stomach, where they would mix with the acidity. The sensation will arise from. So this is where it actually initially starts. Also, in the curvature, the lower curvature of the stomach, some metabolic wastes are collected. It creates the favorable environment for pathogenic bacteria to ignite the inflammation process, which we know that is called Helicobacter pylori. That can lead to ulceration of the stomach. So the food is digested further through the enzymatic phase in the small intestine with the enzymes lipase, amylase, protease, trypsin, and that forms initial food essence that is called Ahara Rasa, which is liquid type of nutritive juice that has fatty acids and phospholipids. It has some proteins and minerals, and that is called chyle. So the chyle is now absorbed into the lymphatic system, and the rest of the food proceeds further down in the small intestine to further be subjected to the biotic phase of our digestion. And here we have the microbiome that begins working on the rest of the food that is introduced to this compartment of the small intestine. Microbiome can be divided into two groups: positive symbiotic bacteria and negative conditionally pathogenic bacteria, or we can call them builders and cleaners. Builders would digest certain foods and produce vitamins, enzymes, amino acids, and neurotransmitters that are some amino acids can actually play a role of. This will be very essential and significant for our body. And the type of food that produces these good things is primarily, well, good quality, plant-based foods. That's what we want to enrich our nutrition with. And the conditionally pathogenic bacteria, which we call cleaners, they do not produce us these good nutrients, but they process the foods that otherwise just need to be removed, and this is what cleaners do. And if we introduce more of this type of food in our regimen, then we would multiply cleaners. Cleaners are, as I said, conditionally pathogenic, meaning it is aggressive type of bacteria. It's always demanding. It's very hungry. It activates during late hours of the day, requires some heavy foods, and they would also secrete their type of neurotransmitters that will affect your mind in a way that you would become hungry and angry and irritable if you do not get that portion of food. So this what happens in the lower part of our small intestine, from where the food actually then proceeds to the large intestine. The less of the living enzymes and vitamins the food has, the more of our own enzymes it will require. And the production of the enzymes is a very energy demanding process. See, what happens with the living food, for example, is when we chew it, it secretes its own type of enzymes. If we release them, they would start digesting its own matter. So it's like they digest their own cells. The food helps us digest itself. And with this process, we do not require much of our own enzymes. However, if the food doesn't have this ability to digest itself with its own living enzymes, then it will require more of our own enzymes, acids in the stomach, amylase and lipase, and those protease enzymes that our organs secrete. And it is very energy demanding process because these enzymes are proteins. And for our body to build proteins, it has to invest a lot of energy in it. So the heavier the food, the more energy we will invest in processing of it. So the more energy we give to the process, the quicker we deplete out of the reserves. A fast track for aging, as you can understand, right? Plus, this type of food weakens and wears down the digestion and hardly breaks down to basic nutrients, especially proteins that get denatured during cooking. That means that once proteins are cooked, the bonds between the molecules actually stiffen and become hard for us to break. Experiments on how crocodiles can digest raw meat versus cooked meat. So they would give them a raw frog, the crocodile eats the live frog, and within hours it's gone, it's disassembled, it's absorbed. whereas they would give them the cooked frog, they would still find hardly digested inside of crocodiles' intestines a day later. So within 24 hours, it'd still be hardly digested. So this is how the proteins get denatured. They cannot just be disassembled that easy. They require high acidity. This is why the more of the type of foods we eat, the more acidic the environments of our body become. This type of food produces more metabolic waste products, more mucus and more pus eventually, pus as the later toxic product, and a lot of debris throughout the tissues, inorganic salts calcifications because the minerals lose their ionic form in the process of cooking. They lose their ions, the ones that can bond with our own enzymes and support the tissues and be absorbed and carried in the higher tissues, in the bones, in the marrow, in the neurological tissue. They lose this ability, and then the minerals can only be useful, if that's the good word, even for the lower tissues in the plasma and in the blood. Inorganic compound of the mineral, especially calcium and some other minerals too, modified salts of sodium, would cause the gout, would cause calcification throughout the tissues and be part of the arterial plaque, and we'll touch upon that too. Let's take a look at the diagram of the tissue formation. Here it is. This is our GI tract where the food comes in, and then it goes through the upper digestive tract. It gets disassembled and the food essence is created. It's called in Sanskrit Ahara Rasa. And there are some nutrients, of course, that's already good and prepared to join the tissue and start building it. And then there is some waste, which is also made as the waste product to remove. And this is the intestinal wall. But because the intestinal wall permeability may be not intact due to certain processes, due to inflammation of the intestinal wall and leaky gut, these waste products partially may also get inside the bloodstream along with the nutrients. And this is what we call poop. So part of poop can actually travel inside of our bloodstream, even further up into the muscle tissue, into the fat. And the fat tissue would be the retainer of these metabolic wastes right here. So there could be some healthy fats and unhealthy fats. Unhealthy fats would be forming out of the excess of the energy, saccharides. We know the transformation process of the energy of saccharides into the LDLs and through triglycerides, LDLs, into the adipose tissue. That's called unhealthy fat. It's sump of the toxic wastes here because it's inertive tissue. The next is the connective tissue. Connective tissue is also sump of toxins. We know the cartilages and fascia, they retain waste products and toxins and heavy metals. Connective tissue, well, it suffers greatly and easy to debilitate and destroy. And this is why people suffer arthritis so much. This would be considered to be external tissues that would carry the external energies. So these are more like bodily energies with the connective tissue somewhere in the middle. And then from this point on, where there's bone, these are internal energies of our body that carries more of the consciousness. And the bone, it's like the made portion between them. This is why in the Bible, I don't know whether it is or not, and everybody might have the opinion of their own, that Eve was made out of the bone of Adam, right? So this is the external energies, internal energies, and this is where the costa or the rib tissue is. However, the marrow, that's the consciousness because it's producing DNAs and cells, and this is where the factory of our blood cells and some of the lipids that are required by the tissues, and then the nerve tissue that carries the mind or the impulses of the mind, that is made of very dense proteins and lipids too. Genital tissue, which is very scarce and produced on demand, especially at this point. This is the level of the male reproductive system that carries the genetic information. High and innermost tissue produces the semen for the male in Shukra Vaha Shrota, male reproductive system, and Females, it is actually at the blood level. However, some genetic information also comes from the genital tissue at this level for the females too. In order for the genital tissue to be properly built, all this process needs to be properly followed, and it takes time, it takes effort. It's the great refining of the food in order to create the purest of all tissues and the most sophisticated, something that can carry the consciousness. So this is why genital tissue is scarce and it's hard to produce. It takes at least 40 days for the food essence to reach from the plasma to build the genital tissue. So this is why males should actually be considerate and preserve their genital tissue. And above this genital tissue, there is tissue which is called ojas, which is not tangible type of tissue, even though it's said it accumulates. Ojas is the work of the energy, the essence to our immune system. So this is the basic bodily tissue formation. Let's proceed and let's get on to the next slide. And this is the concept of Agni, which is fire in Ayurveda or Vedic knowledge. The concept of Agni, fire in Ayurveda, is well expressed and predominant. Agni is the essence of transformation and change. Any process is pretty much associated with transformation. Life is transformation, so it's Agni. And Agni is something that sustains the processes of different nature. And the example of that is becoming spiritual. It's also the Agni, thinking, and the mental activity and the emotional activity, sensory perceptions and digestion. It's all about transformation. It's all about Agni, fire. Different expressions of Agni support different processes within our physiology. If we desire good quality transformation, then we need to strive to maintain the good quality of the Agni. The digestive Agni is presented by digestive enzymes, bile, and microbiome, primarily. This Agni is considered to be tangible. It's more like of the physical nature, physical type of Agni that breaks down the food into the major nutrient groups. It is called Jatharagni. Then there is less tangible expression of Agni that breaks down nutrients already, those that are broken from the food groups. They still undergo the processing of the more subtle Agni, which is called Bhutagni. And Bhutagni is the elemental Agni, which breaks the nutrient down into the elements, into 5 universal elements. We know them. This is what the concept of Ayurveda is built on. 5 universal elements. Not just Ayurveda, but traditional Chinese medicine. They express it a little differently, but there's still 5 elements. The elements of space, air, fire, water, earth. So Bhutagni breaks the nutrients down accordingly. And then there is a mental Agni, which is called Chittagni, which nurtures our subtle body and sustains our energy in pure form. And the spiritual Agni, which is called Sarvagni, and this fire is innermost fire, which is hardly tangible, which is of spiritual quality, so it can only be perceived with a high spiritual strive. When a person is practicing spirituality, then that Agni is said to be very bright and cold. So the highest expression of Agni is light and cold. The lower expression of Agni is hot and dim. So the flame is kind of dim, whereas the light is bright. These are just the examples of the expressions of Agni. We're not particularly talking about all of them. The Agni is present in the membranes of each and every tissue, whereas the Ahara Rasa, which is the food essence, travels through the thicket of tissues. Before it reaches each tissue, it has to be also digested by the Agni, which is called the tissue Agni, Dhatu Agni, which resides in Dhatu Agni Dharakala, which is the membrane between the tissues. So that was depicted in a previous slide. The Agni, the force of transformation, is not just the property of the GI tract, of course, it is intrinsic in membranes of the tissues. Agni can also have different qualities and intensity. Particularly digestive Agni can be high or low, variable or balanced. These qualities depend on a few factors: what element is predominant in individual's constitution, type of nutrition, nutritional regimen, times of meals, environmental conditions, and emotional state. The balanced state of Agni can be achieved by adjusting these factors to your needs. In order to understand what your needs are, you need to understand what quality of digestion you have, and then you will understand what quality of the food and when it is appropriate for you to have this food. We all need this knowledge in order to know ourselves, know our innate nature and energies and qualities, in order to modify our regimen accordingly, modify our nutrition for the best assimilation of nutrients and for the best elimination of wastes, and of course conversion of energy. The Ahara Rasa is the food essence, the substance that gets converted into energy in each layer of tissue, and it also carries the building blocks for the tissue formation. So it carries both the energy for the tissue and it carries restorative particles or parts to restore the tissue. Compare it with the oven. Oven requires the energy where it burns the fire and produces the heat. And then oven gets worn down and would require the repair. Now, the repair would also be provided by some sort of nutrients. So it's both nutrients for the energy and nutrients for the restoration of the tissues. High Agni is when our digestive power is very rich with digestive enzymes and acids and overgrown microbiome, maybe in some cases. Low is when these factors are being suppressed or overwhelmed with mucus, for example, and we'll talk about that. Variable is when they're unstable and do not produce well due to some other factors. Maybe the emotional factor can be also present that makes our Agni variable. And balanced is when it ignites when it's needed. It's properly ratioed to the food amount and quality for the best digestive results. So we all want to strive for the balanced type of Agni in our digestive tract. Okay, so next slide here. Let's get down to understanding our digestion from the Ayurvedic standpoint. And here we'll have to say that not everybody, of course, have the same digestion. And we can frequently hear that somebody say that they can digest anything, where other people say that there are things that they cannot digest and that they cannot even tolerate, which make them feel bad, bloated, and produce different symptoms. Sometimes people eat the same food, but they have different results according to their digestion and as far as how they process and how they feel after that. People have preferences for different tastes, for different flavors, different amounts of food, of course, and there is reason behind it. So Ayurveda is the science that looks at the processes and features of the tissue from the standpoint of qualities. And qualities are attributes of energies. How do we understand these qualities? Let's look. These qualities are well known. Just think of anything in a sense of quality and you will see whether something's cold or hot, right? Something's slimy or rough, hard or soft, quick or slow, subtle or gross. These are qualities that are actually, that can tell a lot about the physical nature of the object. They're descriptive not only of the physical matter, but of the processes too. So there are different types of digestion based on that, and we can distinguish three main types of digestion based on these energies or qualities, which define the quality of digestion and rank them into different types. The quality of digestion conditions the quality of the tissue, proper metabolic process and energy conversion, as well as nutrient assimilation and elimination of waste products and toxins. So to understand this concept better, we need to look at different constitutions. So let's take a look at them from this standpoint. So these three energies in Ayurveda, they're called Vata, Pita, Kapha. These are principles that are comprised of the 5 elements, those that I mentioned before: space, air, fire, water, and earth. In the naturopathic medicine, they also articulate it as Ectomorph, Mesomorph, and Endomorph. I know that in previous years they were using that more commonly, especially the times that I was studying for physician's assistant, but it didn't make much sense back then because we didn't go that deep into understanding natural medicine. And it was only the reference for the constitution built on the external expression of the body, but really it's more than that. So the first principle of digestion based on the dosha is the principle by guess. The second, which is the Pita dosha or Mesomorph type of constitution based on principle of bile in digestion. And these refer to digestive process. And the Kapha dosha individual, which is endomorph type of the physical build. Digestion is built on the principle of mucus. Quality of the processes and qualities of the tissues are defined by the energies of conduction, transformation, and stabilization. This is how we can understand these energies. So Vata, or the Ectomorph, which is based on principle of gas for digestion, is the conduction and transmission. That's the process. It's kind of easy to understand because sometimes I see people kind of struggle understanding what is the air constitution. How should it be understood? Like, does this mean that I have air in my muscle? And they literally just imagine air pumped muscles or something like that. But truly, it has to be articulated or expressed as the energy of conduction is predominant. Transmission and conduction, movement is predominant process within the body and within the digestive tract too. So this is the principle of gas. The principle of transformation, conversion, and change. This is the type of process particular for the Pita dosha or the bile type of digestion. And stabilization is the type of process that is applicable to Kapha dosha or the principle of digestion based on mucus. So this is how we want to understand this. And now let's see what are the features and qualities that each of these type manifests. The constitution overseen by the energy of conduction and transmission has particular features of the body and mind, as well as other processes within the physiology that are defined by qualities. Qualities are attributes of energies, and in case of energy of conduction, they are cold, dry, light, mobile, quick, rough. So these are predominant qualities of this constitution, and they are defining factors for the digestive process. See, we talk now more at the level of perspective of the digestion, not jump into thinking that everybody has pretty much the same type of digestion, or digestion is one pattern fits all type of thing. Let's just go into understanding what healthy foods are and then think that if it's healthy, then it should apply to everybody. This is how people largely think. They think in terms of healthy and unhealthy. But before we understand what's healthy, we need to conceptually understand what it is that defines that healthy for somebody and what are the principles for the understanding of this. So the qualities will present in the process of digestion. The constitution that is overseen by transformation or conversion has particular features for the body and mind, as well as other processes within the body that are define the qualities and the attributes of these energies for this type of the digestion. They are hot, sharp, penetrating, persistent, and may also be rough and flowing. So these are the qualities that define digestion by the principle of bile: hot, penetrating, and sharp. And the constitution that is overseen by the energy of stabilization has particular features of the body and mind. Of course, it doesn't only apply to digestive process, but it applies to the entire constitution of the body, the entire structure of the body, physiology, and the qualities of the mind. And those qualities are gross, moist, slimy, thick, and slow, and stable. And so these qualities will present through the process of digestion, as well as the physiology and the mind. Qualities that are found in constitution or in digestive process for each of these types will define the quality of their digestive enzymes and the quality of the food essence that's ready to nurture the body. Again, digestive tract and the organs that are relevant or in the domain of each of the element. So the oral cavity and the stomach, they're chambers that host the energy of Kapha and define the principle of mucus. The mid portion of digestive tract with the organs which is the small intestine, pancreas, and liver. They're on the domain of the Pita dosha and define the process by principle of bile. And the large intestine is the Vata organ that defines the principle of gas. Now let's talk in particular about each of the type of the digestion. First principle of digestion is by principle of gas. So let's see that. It is characterized by the digestive system that is deficient in the enzymes and digestive juices and moisture. So because the qualities are cold, dry, rough, quick, right? Because it's the energy of conduction and movement. This is why it has the qualities of space energy and air. And air is dry and quick and clear and subtle. All the qualities for this type of digestion too. They're all present there. And the more they're present, the more imbalanced the digestion becomes, incapable of producing good digestive process, digest and absorb nutrients. The enzymes are scarce, the digestive juices are dry and poorly secreted, the moisture is low, digestive Agni is low too, and it is variable. It goes on and goes off. Depending on different states, the enzymes may rise, but then they would be unstable and it may change to dryness quickly, as well as the emotions of such individuals can also be variable. They may go into extremes, being anxious and being exulting, being very active and quickly tired because their constitution is fragile and unstable. Energy can plummet, become secluded and tired and exhausted fairly quickly. So the Agni is low and variable. They also have the thin mucosal membrane in the intestine, which is very fragile. Under the condition digestive tract is dry, it may be cracking even. The amount of digestive juice in the stomach enriched with hydrochloric acid is also scarce. It can hardly handle large amounts of food, especially if the food is dry and cold and heavy. Of course, because the scarce enzymes be very particular and very picky with their foods. They don't eat much, they eat small amounts but more frequently, or they would actually gravitate not having good appetite, and therefore they can actually go malnourished. They can also, because their emotions are worry and anxiety, those are very particular emotions, conditions like anorexia, they're predisposed to quick dehydration, wear down of their mucosal membrane throughout the digestive tract. The digestive process, as well as the general physiology, is dry and cold. They would have cold extremities during warm season even. It is difficult for the digestion to disassemble foods to the basic nutrients. This is why it is essential for them to eat micronutrients. They are prone to hardening of the stools and developing constipation. Therefore, they need the constant digestive support to be able to easily move the bowels, making the stool soft and moist, supporting the mucosal membrane. And digestive tract, such individuals can be easily irritated and consequently inflamed, because irritation may break the mucous membrane and irritate the inner lining of intestines, which would cause the inflammation. Of course, this is how they would develop the inflammation. So they can also build up the intestinal stones out of the mucus. Poorly digested foods being eliminated and digestive tract dries out, that gets them to form the intestinal stones. And generally, because the stools are hard, and as you see, this is how they would come out. They can get as hard as the rock and be pieces like that. That's probably the most extreme condition. This is the point where they develop constipation, hard, rocky type constipation, and they can go with this constipation for days, 2, 3, 5 days even. The more balanced type stool is this in the middle. This is where stool becomes soft and moist and more consistent. Best result, or something that we would like to see, is this type of stool where it looks like good, well-formed pellet and comes out on a regular basis at least once every day. This is what we are aiming for. The type of GI conditions this constitution is prone to develop are irritable bowel syndrome. That's probably number one. The intestinal wall is irritated and they experience excruciating pain throughout the digestive tract. And then, of course, with constipation, dyspepsia and dysbiosis, microbiome is imbalanced under this condition, and the poor enzymic content of digestive juices leads to this variable type of digestion. Enzymes would not be stable and consistent, and this is how they may also develop some inflammation. And because they strain too much because the hard stools, they may develop hemorrhoids. So that's another condition. And in order to balance it, we need to counterpart and oppose this manifestation. We need to start introducing the balancing means. Here they would be moisture and warmth and good stimulating agent for production of enzymes and digestive juices, and supporting the mucosal lining and providing the consistent warmth and moisture. This is the key factors to get this digestion under control. The next principle of digestion, which is based on bile, qualities of Pita condition this digestion. They are, as mentioned before, hot, sharp, light, penetrating. They may be rough, they may be flowing. So it is characterized by a digestive system that produces large amount of digestive juices, enzymes, and bile and stomach acid. Digestive Agni is high in such individual. They would constantly experience sense of hunger, yet be easily irritated and may become even angry if they miss their food. They would like large portions of heavy to digest foods, such as proteins and heavy starches. Their favorite taste would be sour, salty, or sweet, heavier tastes. They would be very precise on the times that they would want to eat, trying to eat at a certain time every day, especially during lunch. They might be eating in a rush, hardly chewing, but just, getting the large chunks and gulping them down. They may get hungry late at night. Also, the feature of moving their bowels quickly right after having a meal and many times during the day, multiple times. They be prone to gradually put on weight, get heavier as they age. That may become a problem. They may accumulate toxic substances that eventually will trigger an inflammation, and inflammation would also be very particular to this type of constitution, but it could be systemic inflammation, something that doesn't bother, like the inflammation in the stomach that can bring about pain, intense sensation, or the type of inflammation that can be in the joint, in the knee, swollen, with edema, with pain. So if the pain factor is present during the inflammation process, then it definitely affects the neurotransmitters, especially the inflammation in the gut, and then it may develop into depressive moods, depression. But if it is more systemic type of inflammation, which is not accompanied by the pain syndrome, then it doesn't specifically affect the mind with depression. Different inflammation can manifest in different ways and can trigger different symptoms as well as the emotional states, and be either directly connected to the mind or indirectly connected to the mind. So these people are usually proportionally built. They're called Mesomorph. They're very proportional. Somebody that has very regular constitution. They may not be tall or too stouty. They have angular features in their physiology. They may be straightforward, intellectual, prone to criticism, engaged in competitive sports. That's what they like. They like to argue, and they are into fitness. The qualities and traits are common to the mind as well as digestive process. Hot, sharp, uneasy, transformative, persistent. We've already mentioned that. Therefore, they'd be prone to easily develop allergies throughout their system and autoimmune processes as later stages of these allergies. And the conditions that are particular for this type of digestion are ulcers, hyperacidity, ulcerative colitis, duodenal ulcers, gastric ulcers, Crohn's disease, liver disease, and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth that would be accompanied with diarrhea, acid reflux, pancreatitis, or any type of inflammation within the digestive tract. So the buildup of heavy and hot metabolic waste products within the digestive system, intestinal wall, and within other tissues and organs throughout the body that can eventually lead to development of autoimmune conditions. the systemic inflammation may develop in autoimmune process in general, which is also considered to be like systemic lupus or fibromyalgia. These are very complex autoimmune conditions that are of malignant nature. Individuals with this type of digestion would be prone to develop. So these individuals will benefit from introducing cooling and pacifying foods in their diet, and spices, cooling digestive spices such as fennel, such as coriander, satisfying but not producing metabolic waste nutrients that can be digested fully without creating any mucus, like lectins, some glycoproteins that like on a starchy basis, or the heavy complex proteins that can also create some autoimmune condition or the allergy condition, which can then produce pus throughout the body. We want them to really go with easier to digest foods. Just as well as for other constitutions, we really want to have the digestion be less wasteful and produce less of the metabolic wastes, meaning that all the foods and nutrients that we get out of the food should be easily digested, easily disassembled without creating too much of the residue and byproducts. Also, bitter taste and astringent tastes help them to balance. Foods that can curb their appetite and neutralize the overproduction of enzymes, and those are bitters that can also stimulate the bile production, as they would make a lot of bile, and we need to assist the liver to expel it. Otherwise, the bile may stagnate. So simple and easy to digest, clean proteins that I mentioned already. That's what's balancing for people of this type of digestion, as well as one other thing, which is when they have the desire to eat, they may want to redirect that energy towards like the spiritual thrive. So instead of eating, channel their energy towards the intellectual growth or spiritual growth, because energy is energy. It really depends on how we channel it. So if we learn how to channel the energy in a different way other than desiring to eat food, then it will become something else than the toxins in our body, right? Or unneeded nutrients, which can overwhelm the body. The type of stool would be liquid. We want the stool to be more of the solid and formed consistency than diarrhea-like stool. And we want to have 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. If somebody having 5 bowel movements, consider regulating their digestion further, taking some spices, and consider the amount and quality of their nutrition too. On to the principle of mucus, or the Kapha constitution individuals, which is also in naturopathy called endomorphs. And here we'll say that the active organs for these people are mouth cavity and stomach. And the most prominent feature of these organs is the production of mucus in excessive amount. Stomach has to produce a lot of mucus in order to protect the lining from the acidity of the hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes within the stomach. So it's kind of protecting itself from itself, but for the need to process the food, of course. Digestive Agni is low because too much of the mucus. It is actually suppressive to the good quality of digestive enzymes and juices, which result to be watery, diluted, and less potent. It's characterized by stagnation throughout digestive tract, bulky stools, and slow bowel movements. Why? Because look at the qualities. Qualities are cool, moist, thick, dull, smooth, soft, slow, and heavy. So these are the same qualities that would be present descriptive of the digestive process, other than the physical traits and features and the mental traits and features too. So all these qualities are descriptive of the energies on all levels, from mental to physical to digestive. Now, these individuals prefer sweet and heavy foods, custardy quality and consistency, texture. They would eat frequently smaller portions because their digestion is incapable of handling large amounts and large portions. They would feel full fairly quickly after having a meal, but get hungry very soon. So they would eat many times during the day in small quantities. They eat on emotional basis because these are emotional and sensitive individual. And unconsciously, they use food as the emotional pacifier. It is quite difficult for them to change their habits. This is how attached they are to the food and to things even around that surround them. They form attachments very easily. They are very sentimental. Each and everything would actually mean some sort of the life moment to which they attach emotionally. And these individuals have very good memory too. By the way, this is maybe partially why they're sentimental. They remember events in details of the past, and this is how they may attach emotionally to them. And each and everything, each and every food, and each and every sensually experienced event would actually be emotionally attached to their sentimentalism. They have the inclination to be hoarding. Eating late is also something that they would do, and eating based on their emotions. However, these people are of very cheerful disposition. They're very communicative. They very open, welcoming, and loving and kind. And since they're very sensitive, if you do not respond to them the same way, then they can shut down. They may become depressed. So due to the stagnant digestive process, they're prone to retain heavy mucus toxic waste products within their digestion as well as within their body. They eventually can trigger the decomposition and decay. Sooner or later, all these heavy deposits and waste products will trigger inflammation and the decaying process and will require elimination, which will be difficult with their constitution because lymphatic system and the elimination as a process is already inertive. And imagine with the slow processes generally throughout the body, this is already delayed even further. And therefore, what they would require is the stimulation of these processes. So because of this, they're prone to developing the metabolic syndrome, which is diabetes mellitus, as we know. And this constitution doesn't like to share, doesn't want to let go easily, and it would continuously retain waste products within, and that will sooner or later develop into a problem. Elimination pathways get congested, which may lead to lymphatic stagnation and development of lymphedema and problems with filtration organs, congested liver, congested kidney, failing kidney, and respiratory system. The following conditions can result from this type of digestion, which are impaction, which can also be a constipation, but of a different type. It's more of the impaction type, slow peristalsis, sluggishness, and heaviness after food, nausea, burping, and intestinal bloating. Also diverticulosis, leaky gut, and candida growth throughout the intestines. So these are more common with this type of digestion. Low acidity, of course. Stools would be bulky, but easy to move, and they would be inertively moved because the stools are collecting and they're just kind of moving themselves, but they may get impacted and then they may experience some constipation. Usually, the bowel movement would be once a day, every morning, and this is a balanced way for these people. If they start to constipate, we want to assist them. And as balancing remedies for these individuals, we would like to introduce hot and stimulating spices and agents for enzyme production and digestive juices to be dried. So less moist foods would actually be good for them. Reducing nutrition generally, meaning less of the heavy nutrients, heavy compounds, and sweet taste. Fresh crunchy vegetables would be good. High in dietary fiber, intermittent fasting, and of course, the very big component is the emotional detachment. Of course, active lifestyle is important, detox and cleansing routines too. Hot spices are the key to enhance their digestive Agni. All right, so this been the overview of different types of digestion. Let's go on to the next slide. Here is metabolic waste that may become toxic on the cellular level. So what's going on in our tissues? Let's take a look at that. So metabolic waste, they can be the type of products that were not timely removed from the digestive tract and from the tissues as well. That's what we're going to talk about more now. They include intracellular debris that may or may not be eliminated from the cells timely into the interstitial space. So this what happens. This is the cell. The cell inside also have the transportation system of nutrients and transportation system of the waste products. The cell is capable of recognizing the nutrients and the debris, and it would put that in the special organelles. First, it would be endosomes, and then they would just be picking up and engulfing some of the waste throughout the cell and then passing it on to lysosome. The lysosome inside would start digesting because lysosome is the one that has the digestive juice inside. So imagine there is an organelle within our cell that also has digestive juices to be able to break down the waste products intracellular level within the tissue, because some other organelles can also die out and break into the debris and would have to be picked up and then processed in order to be expelled into the external environment, as well as some pathogens like microbes and viruses may also get inside the cell, and here the cell would oppose them by secluding them, confining them to a bubble that will then also join the lysosome and form the secondary lysosome. So this is phagosome. Phagosomes are the ones that are picking up the protein type of debris throughout the cell, picks it up and puts that in lysosome. Lysosomes becomes like more full with all sorts of debris, and now it's digesting everything, and then it turns into exosome and it brings the waste products into the interstitial space. This space between the cells, the interstitial space filled with interstitial fluid. Here it says interstitial fluid, which is nutritive type of environment that has some polysaccharides mixed in it and some other nutrients too. Nutrients come and feed the cells from this space, as well as interstitial fluid carries the metabolic wastes too, because the cell puts the metabolic wastes out in extracellular fluid, which is also shown here. So this is the endosome. Imagine that turns into the secondary endosome and then eventually turns into a lysosome, and this is the lysosome that's already joined all the debris and waste products from the internal environment of the cell, and then it puts it out into the extracellular space or interstitial space, which is pretty much the same thing, which is filled with interstitial fluid or extracellular fluid. Now, this membrane has also be permeable, and this is what we would call the external ocean and internal ocean. This is the quality of water that needs to be well fit to exchange between the cell and interstitial fluid. Quality of water defines whether the cell may or may not experience dehydration, because the internal ocean may dehydrate while we're trying to fill the external ocean. So the debris, they come into the interstitial space. Bad nutrients can be brought here with the poorly digested food, poor quality of food essence, which can also be the fragmental particles of proteins, viruses and bacteria. Then they would stay here and be the part of the waste products that the body needs to eventually deal with. So to this debris, we now have the white blood cells, and those are neutrophils and macrophages primarily, that then come and start picking and engulfing these debris in order to take them out of the system. So here's the white blood cells. They work on this debris. And of course, there could be, like I said, viruses and bacteria here, and parasites or dead bodies of parasites and their eggs can also be stuck within the interstitial fluid, because parasites, they don't only live in the digestive tract, they can be within the tissue and laying their eggs here too. They get attacked by our immune system and get disassembled into this debris, and then they would have to be taken out. Altogether, this turns into the pus. So this is pus that consists of the fats, cholesterol, the cellular debris, the fibrous tissue, inorganic calcium that may be floating within the tissue. So everything may be just collected into the pus. And under the condition that elimination system is not well developed or regulated within the tissue, this pus may get delayed and not timely eliminated from the tissue and begin to accumulate. Then the body will encapsulate it into a certain cyst or the pocket of pus in order to prevent it from spreading and flowing and affecting tissue at large in all the areas, but just be confined to one localized area, which can then be taken care of later when the elimination system is functioning effectively and can address this issue. Or else, if it's not addressed, then this cyst and pus will remain for a longer time, as long as years and maybe even decades, and it may even accumulate and become larger, bigger, and then this accumulation of pus in the pocket will attract fungi and attract the viruses and other microbes because it has so much of protein and fats, good nutritive environment for fungi and bacteria that they will come and start eating it. And this is how the oncological condition will then develop. So this is the area of inflammation. This is where the fight is happening. The fight between our immune system and the debris. This debris is antigens and our immune system is antibodies. And wherever they are in contact, we observe inflammation process. So this is the cellular level metabolic waste clearance, which is called cellular autophagy or the cellular debridement, I may call it that way. So the cell is trying to get rid of the debris that it accumulates internally, and then our body, the tissue, is trying to get rid of the debris that it accumulates interstitially in the space between the cells. Okay. What else happens there? Let's look. This is the arterial plaque pathogenesis, which also can be thought of as the metabolic waste product. And this is the way it develops. First, it is the normal human artery as we observe here. And at some point in time, we develop a little crack here, as you see. Where does this crack come from? It comes from the free radical. What is the free radical? It is the ion that is imbalanced in electrons. So it's lacking electrons. Where does that come from? It may come from bad food. But mostly it may come from emotions, imbalanced and negative emotions. And it comes directly from the heart, because our subtle body is electromagnetic field in itself. And when we experience some negative emotion on a physical level, they're expressed as free radicals, the ions that are lacking electrons. And they all come out of the heart. And this is why the heart is very inclined to developing the arterial plaques. The heart inside the coronary arteries, right? This is where the plaques can develop easily, quicker, and more commonly, as well as the aortic and arteries and aorta. This is the most considerable areas or affected areas for the arterial plaque development. Free radicals that come as the result of imbalanced negative emotions rip the inner lining of the artery, of the blood vessel, and make the crack, kind of scratch it. And the crack then starts filling up with cholesterol. This is why the body produces the cholesterol. But what else joins the cholesterol? Cholesterol needs to use silica as the essential part of connective tissue, because this crack can be patched and repaired with cholesterol and silica as the part of the connective tissue, fibrinogen. But we lack silica in our nutrition. This is a fact. And instead of silica, the body uses calcium. Here it is, calcium. And this is how cholesterol mixed with calcium is patching this crack. But since it becomes prominent, it attracts more and more of the waste products to build around it, because it's sticky. So all the waste products like debris, again, those debris that are carried out from the blood, they get caught onto this prominence and add to it. There we can have some macrophages that are carrying proteins of decay, and this is why necrotic tissue inside of the macrophage can begin to develop too. And then some cholesterol, of course, cholesterol and other fats, lipids, and cellular debris and calcification. Connective tissue accumulates here, which is made of the glycoproteins. And this is how the plaque is growing in its size. So what happens in people with Vata constitution, digestive type based on principle of gas, is because the energies are dry and cold, this plaque will become very hard, and hard is another quality. Hard to work on, hard to get off, because for that it would be required to loosen it up and moisten it. And imagine how difficult it is to do when it is inside the artery. It's very hard to naturally dissolve this arterial plaque in people with the Vata constitution because it's hard and dry. Whereas in people with Kapha constitution or the type by principle of mucus, this will be kind of loose and easy to move. It's not the point in which constitution it's easier to do, but the point here is that all constitutions are prone to accumulate this, and it is challenging one way or the other to deal with this type of metabolic wastes inside the arterial wall in order to resolve it naturally. It may easily crack, and the plaque may just break into pieces and travel into different organs, as well as if it's loose and moist, it can also rip off and travel in any way. It is dangerous situation, but it can develop in different ways. This is what I primarily mean by describing the qualities of this formation. Mucus floating inside our body, inside our tissue. We end up having this mucus in abundance in our digestive tract, and that can get dry, clog the channels, it can clog the liver ducts and participate in formation of these plaques too. This is what I was driving your attention to, understanding of what this mucus is dangerous with inside of our body. So, and calcification. So in this case, calcium and cholesterol would be acting like the metal rods and concrete in the building, with the metal rods as a calcium and concrete as cholesterol. This is how our body is trying to fix this crack. Of course, it has to. It has no other choice, but the material that are chosen here can actually cause further damage. But as a temporary solution, it is well suited. And these things may develop from early childhood too, which is a bad thing. So even children may be predisposed of having this problem already within their blood vessels and continue building them throughout their life. And especially that will begin manifesting at the age of 40s. This is when a lot of heart attacks and strokes may begin happening, just because the body is already overwhelmed with these formations. Okay, so the next one is digestion and mental health, a very interesting topic. What happens is we produce neurotransmitters inside of our digestive tract. Some of them are produced by the intestinal wall, and some of them are produced by our gut bacteria. Some of them are just amino acids that have very positive effect on our mind, and they're communicated through the vagus nerve axle, which is the gut and brain communication. And they're letting our brain know that physiology is good, the digestion is going well, and because of that, our brain has good feedback from the body based on the motivators like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and other neurotransmitters, glutamate. So this is how the brain is communicating to the gut. Any sort of the imbalance inside the digestive tract, for example, inflammation, irritation, constipation, would affect the production of neurotransmitters, which the brain will perceive as some sort of symptoms or syndromes, a pain syndrome, and would be off with function too, lacking motivation, feeling tiredness, not being focused well, evincing some depressive moods, hopelessness, and other things, including the sex drive. So general mental stability depend on the well-balanced processes within our digestive tract. And of course, there are some other pathways for the emotional attachments, for foods and different tastes, as well as when we chew extensively and release the flavors. Through that, we satisfy our mind. Mind gets satisfied more so than is satisfied by the quantity. So the longer you chew, the less food you require, the more you satisfy the craving of the mind. This is a good pathway that can be used in order to kind of trick the body and trick the mind initially, but then adapt your body to survive and function on lesser amount of food. And let's see what we might need to do in order to enhance and balance our digestion. That can create the baseline for all of the types of digestion, all of the doshas and all of the body types. First, of course, is what we eat, and that the basic rule that we want to exclude some processed and poor quality foods and GMOs, of course. We want to enhance the quality of the products that we ingest. Exclude any unnatural and refined foods, heavy products that are hard to disassemble and break down to nutrients, especially for those types of digestion who are predisposed to do it poorly. Then do inappropriate food combinations, avoid those, and especially carbs and proteins that I mentioned before. And of course, the animal products. And it's not only bad for digestion and for physiology, because this is the triggering food for internal decay because of the complex high molecular proteins in fragmental states that get pulled into the system and begin the decaying process in the interstitial spaces. But also because it is the karmic food, and it's different topic for discussion, but it is there and it is very significant also because it has the emanation of death, and that affects our subtle energies in a ways that we may not perceive with our conscious mind, but it's still there. And also one particularity about the animal foods and proteins generally, especially complex and high molecular proteins, complete proteins, they may also call them. And some of the nutritional concepts, dietary concepts are very popular now, like carnivore diet, saying that it actually fixes a lot of problems within the body. And yes, it actually does, because number one, it's that not all of the proteins will retain their fragmental state, but some of them, of course, will be digested to basic components, and most of the needs for proteins will be met on one hand. And meat already carries a lot of nutrients other than proteins too, like vitamins, vitamins B, vitamins K, the fatty acids. They're all like in one package because the meat is already the product of this refined digestion of an animal that it underwent. And now it's just you're taking that and you're satisfying your nutritional needs without having to go through the micronutrients and assembling your tissues out of them. You're just taking all in one kind of package. On one hand. Another is when you're digesting proteins or you're introducing your proteins in your system will deplete out of the carbohydrate reserves, because number one nutritional or energy source is the carbohydrate, and our body will not convert proteins into the energy until it has the carbohydrate in the system, like glycogen and the reserves of the saccharides within the system, meaning that it will regulate the insulin production and it will release a great amount of toxic matter too, because fatty tissue, especially bad fats, the adipose tissue is made of the saccharides. And when you eliminate saccharides, meaning carbohydrates, meaning that you're eating fats now and proteins more, you begin not just only reducing carbs reserves of your body, but also breaking the fat tissue down. And fat tissue, as you remember from the graphic, is the retainer of the great amount of impurities too. So that will be released from the system, making you feel much better and relieved from the burden of toxins. But what it is dangerous with, though, and that's the long-term effect not many people talk about and even know, is that these high molecular proteins will be slowly turning into the pus inside our tissue. This is the worst part of it. And the pus is the hardest one to get rid of and clear out of the tissues. And that will be the good substrate and the foundation, the base substrate for development of the oncological condition. And this is how people would feel better on high protein diets, but eventually that will lead to heavy pollution deep in the tissues that can mutate into oncological conditions. And animal products, when I say that, and I mentioned that before, it's not only the muscle tissue of the animal, it is also the casein of the dairy products too. So that is also there. And of course, there's some high molecular proteins of the plant-based products like lectins and some complex proteins in the plant-based foods that can produce pretty much the same effect. Then the fruit and other foods, fruit and fats and fruit and proteins are not good together either. Then we would like to complement meals with fresh vegetables and not overcook foods, definitely, and not have stale old foods. The best food is the one that is freshly prepared. And how we eat. So first is what we eat, then how we eat, and we would like to control our appetite as much as possible and eat to 75% our fullness. So those are good factors that be beneficial for your digestion. Then the next one is how we eat, meaning that we need to eat in a relaxed state of the body and mind in a parasympathetic mode, which is rest and digest, because it is enhancing not only for assimilation, but also for elimination. Sometimes when people are hungry and they think that this is the parasympathetic mode, they may be misled because sometimes excess hunger may come in the flight and fight mode as well, in a long-standing flight and fight response. So the person may become very hungry too. So, but in order to have the digestion well balanced, you really want to balance it out and relax. So first we want the foreplay with the food. That means enjoying the sight of the food and the smell of the food, maybe even touch the food. So that would be a good stimulate for the digestive juice release. Sitting down and slowly chewing extensively and thoroughly, and I mentioned that before. That way we are helping our digestion greatly, because no other organs can break down food as well as the mouth cavity while chewing it thoroughly. And this is even a healthy concept within itself. It's called extensive chewing. There's some people that came up with it before, but I think it's just a pretty common sense, considering that people are not carnivores and we have different apparatus that is not straight biting, but it's side moving. That means we're designed to masticate. So it's a common sense to chew your food thoroughly in a very relaxed state of the mind. Avoid distractions while eating and chewing, focusing on eating fully and inhaling and perceiving the flavors of the food, because that's where the prana is. Prana is important. It is the energy content of the food, which helps the release of the enzymes as well, converting the energy of the food into energy of your own subtle body. Using the digestive breathing after food, there is a yogic routine that is called samana breathing that is done after having food in a relaxed state of the body. You may even lie down on your left side with the head tilted with your left hand and the right hand mudra closing the left nostril and inhaling through the right nostril, establishing the connection from that into your belly button, and inhaling through your belly button 7 times using only the right nostril, in and out evenly. That will enhance the absorption, the force of assimilation, that is called samana vayu. It's a part of Vata dosha that is responsible for absorption of nutrients. If you do that after you eat, you will feel that your digestion is stimulated and you are not experiencing heaviness or difficulty digesting food. Assisting technique for digestion. And also it is important when we eat and when we detox too. So the good eating time is during the day while sun is shining. The sunset, it's the signal for us to stop eating. But going further than that, we'd like to have our main meal at the midday And we don't want to place meals close to each other, so we need to allow a significant time lapse between meals, not less than 6 to 10 hours, sometimes even more, well, depending on your physical activity, of course, and other factors. But the longer you allow this time lapse, the better your digestion will be, the stronger your appetite will be, and other benefits too. We want to eat more during winter and less during summer, and the quality of foods also should vary and differ between these two seasons, with cooling foods during summer and warming and heavier foods during winter. And we don't want to eat for emotional reasons. We want to experience hunger. And even when we experience hunger, we want to tell that this is real hunger, not the emotional based hunger. And that means that if you're hungry and your body is really hungry, that means it may show the signs like weakness and even shakiness. And when you're ready to eat pretty much anything, but not being picky with your food, that's real hunger. If you don't experience any of that, that means your hunger may be connected to your emotion. Just try to discern that and go with the true, real reasons. And we want to detox during the heaviest seasons, and that is the summer, especially after we've nurtured and filled during winter time, trying to keep warm and satiated. This was the time that, along with the nutrients, we accumulated large amount of metabolic wastes that are now delaying inside our system. We want to shed them off, and we want to run the detox during spring as well as during the fall. We want to also detox. That detox doesn't have to be as significant as the spring detox, and that may also include some antiparasitic emphasis in the fall detox. We want to consider the parasites because summer is the favorable season for parasites, not winter. This when we may get infected with parasites. So this when we want to combine our detox effort with the antiparasitic cleanse. So going on is the balancing foods for each of the digestive type, the principle of Gas or Vata. Balancing foods would be unctuous, meaning moisture introducing, warming with mild spices, not very hot, but definitely warming and very warming, and nourishing, soft, semi-liquid maybe, some nutritive enriched soup with spices would be a good way to go. Maybe some digestive tea sipped through the day would also be a way to go. It will keep digestive tract moist and well lubricated. Eating small amounts, maybe more frequently initially, but once digestion is balanced, then they can go to less frequent with a little larger amounts if they desire, and just generally balance their digestion that way. What is imbalancing is what we already mentioned, is dry, light, infrequent food or missed foods or fasting or general poor appetite is very imbalancing for this type. Hard foods, rough, crispy, and crunchy foods. Crunch means Vata presence in the food because we know that dry foods are crunchy, raw foods are crunchy, especially celery has crunch. There's Vata in it, of course, we know that. But in the raw food, there is like more prana, and the crunch is more conditioned by the presence of prana, well expressed marut energy. And generally, raw food have different digestion or different energies and require different digestive and metabolic activity. We will touch upon in the next slide. Pita type of individuals with principle of bile will require solid, moderately heavy foods and cooling spices, such as like fennel is a good cooling spice, cilantro, coriander, mint, lemongrass, coconut water, coconut meat, they're cooling potency foods. Fresh fruit is also cooling, so that's what they would benefit and be balancing for them. Greens and green spices and herbs, bitter herbs and astringent herbs, they are good for Pitta, for curbing their appetite. So, and they're cleansing for the liver too. This is what we want to have Pitta include in their daily regimen. Pitta likes sweet, and sweet in this case needs to be more balanced in terms it should not be very heavy and cooked type of sweets like cakes and pizzas, white flour cooked foods, but it can come in a form of fruit, fresh, juicy fruit that has the prana content in it. That would be balancing for Pita. Still sweet, but balancing. So Pita may require some nurturing times where they can be allowed to have some like heavier foods, and some cleansing, clearing time when they need to go on the herbs and greens and detox and clear out their liver and generally heat, especially during hot season. Pita individuals would become vitiated and extra hot, and for that they would require the balancing mechanisms that are introduced by bitter herbs and greens and astringent spices. And what's imbalancing is whatever's vitiating to the energies and qualities are hot, spicy, sharp, penetrating. Remember, some heavy, because heavy would still make the fire burn higher. Even though proteins, they're cooling, especially animal products, while it's cooling because earth energy is cooling generally, because earth is cool, it's the material that the Pita will vitiate upon. Maybe not initially. It may kind of reduce Pita initially, but once the Pita is taken over, may actually get it out of balance. Large meals, frequent meals, salty foods, sour foods could be imbalancing for Pita. Digestive type by principle of bile. And Kapha by principle of mucus. What's very balancing is hot spices, astringent and bitter spices as well. Light, dry, smaller meals, infrequent, raw, rough, cleansing, detoxifying, less amounts, smaller meals, infrequent foods, and good physical activity. And what's vitiating is the large meals, soft, unctuous, bland, sweet, cool or cold, and bulky foods. But Kapha individuals, they would naturally be intolerable, especially if Kapha is out of balance, then it would not be able to consume large amounts of food anyway. But they would still gravitate towards like heavier foods and more satiating food versus like greens, which actually Vata would like eat greens. They would really like salads and arugula. They would say, oh, arugula is my favorite salad, but it still may not be very well fit to them, not just by itself, but maybe in combination, especially if Vata is trying to be raw, so it still has to be balanced. But Kapha individuals, they would really like to have bulky foods. All right, what's next is the raw food and prana. We need to touch on this too. And what's the difference between raw and cooked foods is that the raw food is the energy type of fuel. It has the energetic content, prana, in it. Here it is. And prana metabolism is different. It requires different metabolic pathway to convert prana in a quality way. And cooked food, prepared food, is the fossil type of fuel. It's matter. This is what the metabolic mode, metabolic pathway in most individuals is set to function, and it's really hard to change. So even the cooked food can be healthy and healthier than the food of the previous stage. For example, standard American diet, SAD, is cooked, but then the homemade food is also cooked, but it's different quality already, right? So we really want to see the difference in gradation of the cooked food too before we even jump or think about raw food. So especially people who are not gravitating or choosing to eat raw, not because they don't understand the benefits of it, but because their system is not yet ready and their consciousness is not ready too, because that is a factor too. And their energy system throughout their body is not ready to absorb and process the energy content of food. They would still benefit from changing the quality of the cooked food, which is an important thing too. So going from standard American diet to more homemade diet and so on and so forth, while reducing the burden of toxins throughout the body and balancing their digestive wellness with cooked food, same way. So here is the graph that actually defines the energy content in food. Energy definitely is not homogeneous. This top part is the energy. This low part is also the vibration, but of the matter. So this is the body. So this is energy, this is matter, okay? And the raw food contains them all. When we cook food, this upper part of the vibration is pretty much gone. And what we are left with is this lower part of the food that is expressed only in the material state, in the physical state. So it is easy to convert energy to energy, but for that, the metabolic pathway needs to be active. That is called cold energy synthesis. It's the type of metabolism that our body is capable of to properly convert the energy. Because when it's not in tune with this system, the raw food will end up producing the byproduct, which is the Vata. And Vata is vitiated energy of air, which is cleansing too. And this is how raw food is initially experiencing the cleansing, detoxing effect on the raw food. But they hardly can sustain raw food further on. Within years, like 2-3 years after, raw foodists would start converting back to cooked food because they cannot sustain the raw food because this mechanism is not activated. To activate, there's some practices for that. The energy practices need to be undertaken and followed persistently in order to properly convert the energetic content of the food into the energetic content of our body, of the subtle body. But if it's not activated, then what we're doing, we are converting matter into energy. And there is also a mechanism within our body that does that, but it is very demanding process. It is hot energy synthesis, and it is the secondary by nature. So why is it secondary? It's the supplemental. For example, if all of a sudden we've come into the time when we don't have fruit and vegetables available, and we have to convert into omnivores or meat eaters by need, which already happened during Ice Age. We had to convert to be meat eaters. Then we are supplied by this mechanism. The nature is very wise, and it supplied us with this mechanism. We activate this mechanism, which is the hot energy synthesis, and we survive on it. And we may even thrive on it. But since it's energy demanding process, it shortens our lifespan. It brings our consciousness down because this element is missing, and our consciousness can only kind of get trapped on this level, on the level of Manipura chakra, Svatisthana chakra, Muladhara chakra. This is where our consciousness can be residing. Hardly on the level of Anahata chakra, which may still be, but it is hard for people who are meat eaters to get to the higher expression of consciousness because it's just missing in the environment. It's missing in their food. It's missing in their practices. And our lifespan will also become shorter. This is what we're actually observing through these time periods, through these Ains and Yugas. It is possible to physically thrive on this mechanism because, again, it's nature provided, which is a wonderful thing. This great that we have it. Nature takes care of us, in any ways possible. But there are ways to be able to turn on this and activate this mechanism, metabolic activity, and become more capable of converting energies. And that can be very rewarding and liberating for people who are capable of doing that. They would experience tremendous transformations in their consciousness, in their physical state. This is a big topic too, and it requires separate attention and discussion because there's so many details on how to convert, what to convert, how prana gets converted, how it doesn't get converted, what are the factors that are in the way, and what are the factors that are helping this process. So this is a very interesting topic in itself. All right, and the next one is now after this presentation, I hope that everybody be able to, at least at base level, identify their own energy constitution and digestive type based on the features presented. So what would be right for each individual type of digestion and constitution build would be that the Vata dosha, which is the type of gas, would require to be well satiated and stable, form stable, good quality tissues, and be stable in their mind. They can do short and easy detoxes, especially initially, and then no long-term fasting, of course. Warm and moist climate, that's where they would be thriving. And since the large intestine is the organ for Vata dosha, it requires a good balancing technique for the people of this constitution. What is required for Pita dosha is the mental preparedness, because Pitas are very intellectual, and before they do something, they would really like to think the process through and they're not very spontaneous. So introducing things to Pita, you cannot get them spontaneous. Well, they may get spontaneous, but they may not be very happy about it. They still can. They can pretty much be anything. But if you want the Pita to really put heart in something, you really want to have them prepared for something that you want to introduce, some sort of change, some sort of action. Tell them ahead of time so they have time to think and intellectualize about it. And then once they put their yes and no's into it, which you can also participate in, then they'd be more willing to carry out this activity. They would benefit from living in a cool to warm seasons, and if they're well balanced, meaning that if they live in warm and hot environment, they would have to really cool their inner environments by introducing cold potency foods and spices. This is actually the key for everybody to follow, the key principle. We are trying to balance the external forces with the internal forces, the internal environment. That means that if the climate is hot, it should not be the sign for you to turn the air conditioner, initially at least. It should be sign for you to change your nutrition and switch to cooling potency foods in order to balance it from within. And then you'd be balanced, and the physiological processes and mechanisms and functions would be balanced within the body and well adapted and well ratioed with the external environment. And the other way around, if it's cold on the external environment, we want to introduce warming foods and spices and keep warm within. And this principle applies to all of them, but especially for Pitas who live in the hot environment, or for Vatas who live in cold environments, right? But Kaphas, they are more adaptable. They can sustain one and the other. They're okay in hot. They actually thrive in hot seasons without any additional means to balance. That actually stimulates them and clears them and balances them. In cold, they don't do that well, but still can be okay. And Kaphas can tolerate long fastings, and they would benefit from cleansing of their stomach, because stomach is the organ for digestive principle of mucus. And Pitas would benefit doing the liver detoxes on more or less regular basis, at least once a year, depending on their nutrition, depending on what they do during the rest of the year. Okay, so please understand this, understand your energies based on the presentation, and consider the balancing techniques in order to balance your digestion and get best results on that before going to the doctor. Maybe you'll be able to resolve your current imbalance, especially if it's not too complicated. When it's too complicated, it may require the medical intervention, then there is no question about that. Please go and don't wait, and still consider these balancing techniques. And the best way to balance your digestion is doing the detox initially, and we offer the detox that is balanced within itself, is a complete detox system which is well suited for all the doshas and all digestive types. It can be modified and regulated to fit all the needs for all doshas. This is how we made it. It is the yogic type of detox, and it produces the real results. And we do it not just as a form of detox where you get your powders and supplements and you're on your own. No, it's not like that. And we don't use any powders, right? But we use some spices, of course. And primarily we use the nutrition and some routines. And most importantly, we do it as a guided program, online guided program, where we participate with you and guide you through the process. You can share, we support you emotionally, we support you physically. We pay attention to the dynamics of your individual needs, and this is the way that we provide that and present it to you and offer it to you too. So our detox reestablishes digestive power, it rebalances the Agni, removes the gross physical toxins, decay and decomposition from out of the body. It chelates the heavy metals too, rejuvenates the blood and lymph and tissues on the cellular level, It produces great results in intracellular and extracellular clearance of toxins. Cells can be of different tissues. The cellular metabolism and cellular rejuvenation may happen at different levels. And our detox program offers results on all the levels of cellular rejuvenation, revitalizes the organs and restores their function, boosts the conductivity of energies because it rebalances the physical body the way that energies open up and start flowing freely. And it balances the mind and produces the good, tangible results in balancing the mental energies that you will experience after detox. So this is what I had to say. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate your attention and being here and supporting us. So please continue following us, and we'll talk more about natural health and different other aspects of it. Thank you. If you find this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to our channel, and get notifications. Also, leave a comment of at least 8 words. Comments make difference.